Thank you for joining us tonight. We want to take this time to have a conversation. It's always good often to look back, to reflect on what God's been doing, and to take some time and think together and look forward to what God is going to do. We're still in the midst of this season that is in many ways frustrating, difficult, annoying, inconvenient, every word you can think of. And yet, in the midst of all that, there's still a lot to be thankful for. And so as we begin tonight, that's really where we want to start, is to be thankful and take some time to celebrate. Dr. What does it look like for us as a church body to be thankful for? What could we possibly be thankful for in the midst of all this?
Well, let me say two things. First of all, the Bible says give thanks in everything.
Yeah.
So, no matter what, we give thanks. We're thankful. The Lord has been faithful. We're thankful. This is the opportunity for us to put into practice what I've been preaching for 17 years, what Buck Run has stood for 202 years, and that is that the gospel of Jesus Christ is paramount. And we should be thankful that we know Christ, we are on our way to heaven. And by the way, that's the second thing I want to say is let's put this in perspective. I got a text today from a pastor friend of mine whose daughter was told today she has between 2 days and 2 weeks to live. It's not COVID related, I don't think. She's had cancer. Man, I just thought to myself, I've not had a single problem this year that compares to that. The Bible teaches us what we all deserve is hell. We deserve hell. And let's not lose sight of that everything above that is grace. So we are bathing in the grace of God here at Buck Run especially. And let's not lose sight of that because we're going to stand before the Lord and answer for the way we responded. Everything's about response. And Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Read the book of Philippians. And man, we've got a lot to be thankful for, both in perspective because we're on our way to heaven. Things are not as bad as they could be. Secondly, because we're commanded to. But man, let's look and see what God is doing. You know what has shocked me? Every week I stand up here to preach, Saturday night, 2 services Sunday morning, and in every service I see faces I've never seen before. People that are joining us online and then finding their way here. We've had 25 new members during this pandemic. I don't even, there's no way to explain that other than the grace of God. I'm so grateful to the Lord for that. The Lord has spared us. There's not been, that I know of, a serious outbreak in our church. No contact tracing has come back to us because we've done things very carefully, and our folks, I just can't brag on you enough. You have been wonderful. You've cooperated. I want to urge you to keep doing that. I know some of you go, well, I'm a hugger. Not now, you're not. Don't put that on anybody else. You don't get to decide that for anybody else. I like shaking hands, all that. That's who we are. Not now. It's not. We look at each other. We make these motions. Let's make sure that we keep doing well. We don't want anyone to feel unsafe. And by the way, there are a lot of people who are coming because they know we're taking such care. So let's keep that up. And this is just a reminder to us of our need of Christ. And this is what Paul says about weakness in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, that when I'm weak, that's when I'm strong. So he says, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my weakness, that the power of Christ might rest upon me. This is an opportunity for the power of Christ to show itself in us. So let's lean on him. Let's just admit our complete and utter dependence on him. But the good news is we have him. We've spent the last 2 years going through the Gospel of Luke. And we should be closer to Jesus as a result. And we should look more like Jesus in the way we live as a result. So this is our opportunity to show that.
Yeah, there's just a ton of things that the Lord is still doing here. Even when things look different, they don't look like they used to, and they'll get back to where they were at some point, but the Lord is still working. The Bible's still true.
Marvelous.
The preaching of the words is still effective in the hearts of unbelievers to call them to salvation, and in believers. And so you're right, there's just a ton of things the Lord is doing that we can be thankful for. And I think it's what we can be looking forward to. The Lord is still going to do this.
There is no church I'd rather go through this with than Buck Run Baptist Church. I guarantee you that. this is the place I want to be.
One of the things that we're thankful for and really looking forward to is this weekend to be together, to celebrate the Lord's Supper, to have a business meeting. For Buck Run, business meetings in many ways sometimes are boring because they're not contentious and they're a good celebration of things that are coming in the coming weeks and months.
Well, that's right.
Year.
This weekend is important. And I know some of you may wonder, the governor made some announcements today. He said he's going to say something specifically to churches tomorrow. I don't think it's going to change our plans for the week. Let me just tell you that, so this week we're planning on doing what we were planning on doing, with one exception. We're not going to be able to have childcare this weekend for a lot of reasons. Just trust me on this. I don't want to go into that, but we've just determined it's not best for us to have the childcare. So children that are able are certainly welcome to be in here in the sanctuary with their parents. We have that big, spacious training room in there. Parents can sit with their children in there as well. So everything else we're looking forward to doing, because we're confident of our protocol of how we do things very, very safely. So all three services will look alike: Saturday night at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday. We will have the time of worship. I'm going to preach a little bit shorter sermon. It's worth you to come just to see that I can do that. I know Sunday I preached an hour, I think. So I will go less than half that this Sunday because we want to have time. We will have our business meeting in which we approve our budget, elect deacons. You'll see our financials, all that we like to do. Please know we love being transparent here, and we never mind questions. You're welcome to ask any questions. But our finance team has worked diligently to make sure that we're on top of things and prepared for what's coming next year, and that's why we have this business meeting. And am I missing anything? Communion. Oh, yes. And at the end of the sermon, before the business meeting, we'll have communion. It will be those individually wrapped and served communion cups with the wafer on top. And we're going to be like the Israelites, eating the bitter herbs, that we remind ourselves that COVID-19 is bitter, and it makes us long for the time when it's not like this. But it's still so important for the church to gather and to worship when we can do that safely. And then this will be our first time to have communion since the pandemic began. And I think that's important. Now, you need to know that we have decided, and then, by the way, Sunday night, we'll also have the youth are going to meet and gather, again, very safely, socially distanced. But again, we think we do that well. We abide by the guidelines, and the youth are just last time had a great time. So we're going to do that Sunday night. The weekend after Thanksgiving, we're going to go virtual. We think it's best that weekend to just go online. So this Sunday, everything's going to go as planned. Then the Sunday after Thanksgiving, we're going to go virtual. And I think that's the safest and the best thing for us to do in light of what we see happening and the governor's recommendations and Thanksgiving coming. We just think that's the best way for us to go.
Yep. And just be watching for more communication after that week. We'll make decisions. We'll look at stuff, but just for that week. Scott, will you remind us, are there any things we need to know detail-wise? If people are thinking about the business meeting, where can they find that information? How do they vote? What does that look like for us this weekend?
So all members last week got the information of our church budget and our committees and our deacons. You will get an email. Members will get an email again tomorrow where you'll have our financials, like those type things, the agenda for the meeting, so that you can be prepared. It's going to be different. We're not going to be passing you papers when you walk in the door. You need to go ahead and review that email, as we talked about on Sunday, look at our budget and those things. Go ahead now and prayerfully consider, but think ahead of time of the up to 13 men that you will elect to serve as deacon. And then we'll be doing that digital. You'll be doing that from your phone, and we'll talk about clear instructions on that this weekend. But you'll get that information. And as Dr. York said, we want to be as transparent as possible. I'm so grateful for our finance committee and our business manager, who are very, very thorough in our finances. But if you have questions about anything leading up to that, please reply to that email or give me a call. We would love to be able to answer those questions about anything that you might have. We want to be available so that you're prepared and can vote in confidence to approve and to elect on Saturday or Sunday.
It's great. Looking forward to that time together, and really, again, thankful that we can do it. That's going to be a different sort of business meeting than we've ever had before, but we're thankful to still be able to do it. We are approaching about the 8-month mark of the pandemic, which we've talked about all the time is way longer than any of us thought we'd be in this. You said this past weekend, I think at all 3 services, just reminded folks to not grow weary in well-doing. What does that look like for us? We don't, obviously, Governor put new stuff down today. We don't know what next week or a month or 2 months is for sure going to look like. What does that look like for us as a congregation to not grow weary?
You know, first of all, I think we need to look at those among us who've done things well like this. Man, in the past few years, I've watched especially faithful men in our church, husbands, care for their wives while they're dying. You know, none of them looked at me and said, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I just can't do this anymore. Walked out on caring for their wives. In fact, I'll never forget sitting by Kathy Casey's bedside and Bobby looked at me and saying, I'd do this as long as I needed to. I'd do this as long as I could. Man, that's what love and commitment looks like. You know, that's what it looks like to not grow weary in doing well, knowing that in due season you'll reap if you don't faint. You know, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. That transcends a global pandemic. That is what the Christian life is to produce all the time. You know, it's so important. I talked about perspective earlier, and that's just important that we keep that we remind ourselves that this is what it looks like to follow Christ, that it's always hard, and it's daily taking up a cross. I've said it many times. Jesus didn't say take up a cushion and follow me. He said take up a cross. This is an opportunity for us to show our Christ-likeness. I was reflecting today on the Sermon on the Mount. My son Michael's been preaching the Sermon on the Mount and sort of listening to him and things. You know, Jesus there in Matthew 5 talks about if someone compels you to go a mile with them, go 2. Now, let me just ask you, at what point do we think that applies? You know, I mean, when does that kick in? Well, we're in a situation now where we're being asked to walk a mile in a lot of ways. Well, what's our response? What did Jesus tell us to do? Is there any question in our minds the attitude and the spirit of Jesus in a time like this? He said if someone asks you for your tunic, you give them your cloak also. Someone strikes you on your cheek, you turn to them the other. This is an opportunity for us to not just do what is required of us, but to go the extra mile, to be safe, to be kind, to be gracious. And so, I will tell you, the good news is that I do see an end to this. For the first time, man, the news in the past week is great. I've really read a lot about these vaccines and the science behind them. In fact, it's so encouraging that I think the ramifications for the way that they've designed these vaccines on other diseases is going to be yet told in the future. I think we've crossed some barriers here that will be helpful in many other ways. I really think, I mean, I know I'm going out on a limb here, but I really think we've got to hang on till about the end of April. I think you're going to see some sense of normalcy by the end of April, 1st of May, based on what they're saying about these vaccines. And I'm very, very encouraged. It's the first time since this thing started that we really had something that said, oh, here's a rationale for when this thing might end. We've all guessed and wondered, and like you said, none of us thought we'd be sitting here around Thanksgiving talking about this, but here we are. And it's getting worse and not better in some ways, but man, there is an end in sight. So let's be faithful, let's be safe, let's be helpful, let's have the fruit of the Spirit and care for one another. It's just so important. Every time I stand up in this pulpit on Sunday, I look out and I see individuals, and I could call names of some of our senior members who come, and some of our folks that have, I hate the name, but comorbidity factors. But they see the way we're doing things and they feel safe here. I'm not going to let up on that. That's my job as a shepherd. And you may not always agree with every decision that we make, and that's absolutely fine. But the one thing I hope you don't question is that we're trying to do the right thing and follow Christ. And I go to sleep at night like pretty well because I know I'm really doing my best to listen to the Lord and to care for our people. And yeah, it's hard. Yeah, there are a lot of opinions and there's a lot of noise out there. But I want to have humility. I want to show the fruit of the Spirit. I want to be a good shepherd. I want to be faithful to the gospel and follow the mandate of Christ and the way we lead. So that's what we're going to keep trying to do.
Yeah. I think about Peter. I think it's Peter calls us to unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. And I think there's a list of things, if we could embody those, there's not much that would come that would really disrupt us that we could press through.
While we're at it, man, here's one for you. And I love Hebrews 13. Listen to this. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they're keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. I am so grateful that this church has let us do this with joy and have understood that, we're the ones who are going to give an account and stand before the Lord for what we do. And I don't always get it right, no one does. But I think I always want to honor him. That's my goal and desire. And I very well may stand before the Lord one day and he'll say, you missed it on that. But I don't worry that he'll say to me, you weren't trying to honor me in those decisions. I know I'm trying, and I'm just trying to lean on the Lord. And I'm grateful for a church that really does get it. Every week I get, literally dozens of emails and cards saying, thank you, Pastor, for the way you're leading us in this. And I'm so grateful for that. It's an incredible encouragement. I've got a few of the other things too, but far, far fewer. And, again, I've been around 17 years. There's not many surprises with me. Sure. And people know me and know my heart. And we're okay. Here's the thing I would say. Don't make any decisions during this COVID thing that a year later you're going to look back on and say, oh, I came up with a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That's not a good thing. What we need to be doing after COVID spiritually is what we need to be doing during COVID spiritually. And we want to make good decisions in this because as we come through it, we want to come through it with unity, not uniformity. We're not all going to think alike and look alike, but the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. That's clearly the goal. And everybody needs to esteem others better than themselves, Paul says, and not just look on our own things, but also on the things of others. That's just clear. And so if we're looking at this saying, well, this is what's best for me, that's not always the best way to look at it. What can I do that shows that I value others? That's the way we go at it.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to remind people that we covet their prayers as pastors. There's not a pastor on our staff that I think feels capable in and of themselves that we want people to be praying for us to help us.
Yeah, pray for all pastors. Just because I've been around a long time, because, I've probably taught half the pastors in the Kentucky Baptist Convention by this point. I get calls every day where pastors are they're so hurt and wounded and defeated by trying to do the right thing. And some people think they're doing too much. Some think they aren't doing enough. All kinds of stuff. And man, pastors are really in need of your prayers. And we at Buck Run are in a position where the Lord's allowed us to bless and minister to others. We want to do that well. We need to be an example to others to show them how to stay unified behind the Lordship of Christ.
James in his letter talks about the way that God uses trials, testings of our faith to produce completeness in us, to bring about maturity in believers. As you pray and think about not just Buck Run, but just the church in general, what are you praying that God is going to do in the church? 'Cause I know he's doing something, that he's working, he's shaping, he's molding the church so that James can say, we can rejoice in trials. What do you think God is doing? Maybe we'll never fully know, but.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in life, in my marriage, in the ministry, is that you never trust God until you have to. So God puts you in positions where you have to. And you learn to lean on him. You learn to trust him. And furthermore, I've learned that your attitude really is just so much of the battle. Again, when I talk about these men caring for their wives, their attitude was what enabled them to do that, even with joy. When in your marriage, if you get out the magnifying glass and look at your spouse and you focus on their faults, you're going to get unhappy in your marriage. When you learn to turn those faults into precious things, oh, look at that. She eats pistachios in bed. You know, when you learn to see the happiness in those things and see it as a joyful thing, and it transforms the thing into a sanctifying stimulus in your life instead of something that pulls you away. And that is what I pray for Buck Run. Instead, we look at this and say, wow, okay, I don't understand all this. I don't know everything that God's up to, but I do know this, that he's predestined me to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. Yeah. I know that. Yeah. And so how is God conforming me to the image of Christ in this? And Jesus came to serve. I mean, we've seen this in Luke. He's the master who girds himself and reclines his servants at table and serves them. This is our opportunity to do that. And the degree to which we do that in our community and to one another is really going to set, I think, is going to position us for just an incredible time as we come out of this. We come out of this unified, joyful, focused on Christ. Man, you talk about momentum, I think we're going to have it.
I think our hunger for the right things hopefully will grow. The things that we miss, the Lord, I think, can use this time to remind us how important they are. There's still a lot of ways to connect. Scott, would you sort of remind us, to walk us through quickly just some of the things online that people can connect with? There's so much out there, and it's been out for a long time that I know sometimes people lose track of what classes are available. Can you remind us of some of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, outside of the worship service, our virtual Sunday school playlist is perfect for your whole family. There is a kids, a student, and 2 adult classes, and 2 new adult classes just started this week. You can catch those in the Buck Run app under the Watch and Listen tab, or go to our YouTube page. There's playlists, there's videos, there's a lot of content there. Each week, Dr. York on Thursdays has a Doctrine of the Week video, just a short, brief video where he's just walking through different doctrines and how that applies and matters. That's an easy way to just be growing and being fed. Many of our staff are putting out videos, Lead Well videos, just on leadership and ways to grow in that area. Each day on our Facebook page, maybe the most used thing that we have right now as a daily prayer guide. And if you're following that this week, each day we're praying for a sister church in our community. We've reached out to those pastors and just asked for 3 or 4 ways that we can specifically pray for them. So when you're following that, you're praying through Scripture, you're praying for churches, you're praying for our missionaries. There are lots of ways to stay connected. Community groups are meeting virtually for students. There's D groups. Our kids have groups. I'm so grateful for our ministry leaders that are taking opportunities to whatever they can do to invest. They're adapting. Every week we are asking the question: is there anything that needs to change? Is there anything we can do different? As we're learning more tech and more things, and our people are learning more things, we're continuing to take advantage of every avenue. And I hope that you are investing in those opportunities. They are good for you.
I really want to challenge. I want to say dads, but I think I need to say heads of households, because we have a lot of single moms too who don't have a husband and a father to take the lead. But if you're a head of a household, I really want to challenge you to step up and really be like a spiritual leader in your home. Point your children to Christ, to the Word. so much of this just hangs on your attitude and what you do with it. I'll tell you, this last week I was talking to a family in our church. The husband has been laid off from his job, and yet he's just taken this as an opportunity to really shepherd his children. And he's doing all kinds of neat things with his kids and going on hikes and teaching them things. And his wife said to me, she said, I really dread seeing him go back to work. Now, when I heard that, I thought, okay, now there's somebody who gets it. That instead of sitting around sad and moping and hurting, which I'm sure there's a part of them that is, but they're not allowing that to set the tone in their home. They're rejoicing, pointing their kids to Christ, and the kids are like, oh, this is one of the best times we've ever had.
How will that shape how they remember 2020?
Our dad is on, that's exactly right. Everybody's going to talk about what a terrible year 2020 was, and I really do think those children will look back and go, wow, that was a great year. Yeah. We got more time with our dad that year, and again, this is going to set a direction and a tone for the future. Don't grow weary in well-doing. In due time, we'll reap if we do not give up, if we do not faint. Don't give up. Don't faint. Keep at it.
And that's one of the reasons we do so much of what we do and put those videos out, is to help those heads of household as they're stepping up, to give them good resources to think through how to lead their family well, and to do that in a way that maybe they've not had time or opportunity to do pre-pandemic, that they've got maybe some more margin to be able to do that now.
Yeah, one thing that's coming up in December as we look towards Christmas, and obviously the holidays are going to be a different time, but our student pastor, Will Morris, has put together a pretty big team of writing Advent devotionals that are coming out. That'll be launching in the first weekend of December. Really excited for that. There's just a few devotionals a week been written by staff, lay folks, ministry leaders. There's songs that Adrian and the praise team are putting together for us to use in our home. There's questions for adults and kids and students to point us to Christ during that time. And that's honestly something we've talked about doing for a while. And the pandemic has pushed us to go forward with things and to be creative and to think of how we can not just glorify God, but how we can help our families grow like we're talking about during this time. So we do hope that you are taking advantage of these opportunities this time. 2020 is not a waste. It's not a bad year. As fathers, as husbands, as moms, as children, if we get more time with our family, more intentional time where we're talking about Christ in the home. Thanks to Melanie Brewer, that's been true in our home with Explore the Bible. Our kids are in the Bible more. It has been a great year in so many ways.
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify, but we're not in hell. We're not in hell. This is all grace. Let's receive it as grace, and let's live as people who know the grace of Jesus Christ, and the Lord will be glorified.
Well, as we sort of bring our time to a close, what are maybe just a few things that we can be praying for together as a church? I know we're all praying. What are some things that maybe come to your mind, things that we could be praying for together over the coming weeks, months?
My number one burden in this is how we continue to share the gospel with people outside. How do we get, I don't want to just throw it up on Facebook and say, hey, I hope lost people watch this. How can we be strategic in taking the gospel to friends and neighbors and to the ends of the earth? Our missionaries are struggling. I mean, they're struggling. I'm hearing from our missionaries, and we really need to pray for the gospel to be proclaimed even in this. What are new and strategic ways that we can proclaim the gospel? That is the thing that keeps me awake at night, because we're going to come out of this. And Buck Run was here before I came. It'll be here after I go. Buck Run's going to be okay. I do know that, but people are going to hell. Yeah. And that should be the burden that directs us, drives us, unites us. Mm-hmm. So pray for us to know how to be strategic with the gospel in ways that perhaps we've not thought about before.
Yeah, that's great. We want to encourage you to take the time to pray, maybe even tonight with your family as you're watching this. Take the time over the next few days to just continue to be praying in prayer for our church, that the gospel would continue to go forth. We will continue to serve and to lead as best we can with the Lord's help and as prayerfully as possible. Obviously, none of us knows what tomorrow holds, and it causes us to trust the Lord moment by moment. But we're thankful for you spending this time tonight with us as we look back a little bit and look forward a little bit. Anything else you want to add before we?
I'm really excited about having communion on Sunday, even with those terrible tasting wafers. I really am. It's just going to be a sweet moment. I think it very well might be the most memorable communion that I ever have at Buck Run. So that's just going to be a sweet thing, and I look forward to it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you, Lord willing, this weekend.